Hi everyone, I'm Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch President, with our weekly update here on Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope on Twitter. Thanks for joining us this week. I wasn't here last week, so there's a lot to catch up on in Judicial Watch's battles to expose and stop government corruption. For those of you who don't know, Judicial Watch is a nonprofit that is charged with exposing what the government's up to, uncovering government corruption, and where we can, trying to stop it. And to that end, we were quite busy in the courts this week, both with hearings and new lawsuits, and also in exposing government corruption, specifically in this case by the Obama IRS. But first up is the Mueller investigation, which, if you've been watching any of our previous updates or tracking Judicial Watch generally, we have objections to, because we believe the Mueller investigation is out of control, constitutionally speaking. I'm not quite sure what it's even investigating, but it isn't subject to the accountability and oversight that other Justice Department investigations would be. When you look at the special counsel regulations, Rod Rosenstein, who is the #2 at the Justice Department, who appointed Mr. Mueller, is the responsible official because Jeff Sessions recused himself. So Rod Rosenstein is responsible for everything Mueller does, from approving his budget to making sure that he's complying with Justice Department regulations and standards in prosecutions and investigations. And I don't think the special counsel regulations are written in a way so as to provide the constitutional oversight necessary for the Mueller investigation, because Rosenstein basically doesn't have day-to-day oversight over Mueller's investigation, and can only fire him for cause, which means that it's tough to fire him, which raises other constitutional concerns. And if he does something abusive, essentially only Rosenstein can come in only after the fact and really not do much about it in terms of making whole the person who was abused by the Mueller investigation, maybe like Paul Manafort, whose home was raided by Mueller's agents with guns drawn. Think about that. This is a basic white-collar investigation, and they go conduct a pre-dawn raid against the president's former campaign chairman. Really outrageous. And who's running the show over there? And we talk about these things, I understand, but Judicial Watch, unlike Congress, unlike the Justice Department, unlike the media, we actually do something. And we're going to provide the oversight as best we can of Mr. Mueller, despite the Congress being AWOL and the Justice Department being AWOL. We went to federal court yesterday. We filed a new Freedom of Information Act lawsuit just to find out basic information about what Mueller is up to. Namely, what is his budget? There's been speculation about what it in theory costs for Mueller to run his investigation, but we don't know. According to the Washington Post, he submitted a proposed budget, but we haven't seen it. The American people haven't seen it. Why is it secret? He's hired up at least 16 people, as best I can tell, prosecutors, which would make it one of the most massive Justice Department investigations I'm aware of. Typically, you only have a handful of prosecutors at most to conduct even complex investigations and prosecutions. And on top of that, we don't know what his scope is. What is he doing? What has he been authorized to investigate? So we asked those questions of the Justice Department, and they ignored us. And when it comes to Judicial Watch, if you're a government agency and we ask you reasonably for records and you ignore us, you do so at some risk for a lawsuit. And sure enough, Judicial Watch went to federal court to get access to these records. And I want to know why Mueller's investigation seems to be growing without end, even as information that's coming out shows that there's really not much to investigate, at least when it comes to the purported basis for the investigation, which was alleged collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians to interfere improperly in the election. There's been no evidence that's taken place. Even the essentially Democrat-run investigation out of the Senate, the Republicans let the Democrats basically run the investigation out of the Senate into the Russia issue. They admitted the other day that they have found no evidence of collusion. Think about that. Months of testimony, thousands of documents, still no evidence of collusion, but the we're going to get Trump no matter what crowd at the Senate is going to keep the investigation open. Now, we understand the politics of congressional investigations. They're usually useless or political or both. But why is a prosecution going along the same track without any check? And why isn't it being checked? Mr. Rosenstein is the #2 official at the Justice Department. Congress should call him in, ask him about these budget issues, ask him about these constitutional questions, and he should be asked about the conduct of the investigation in terms of these pre-dawn raids on some rich white guy in Virginia. I mean, that's in essence what went on there. Come on. Who are they trying to make an example of? Now, on top of that, you've got as I said, the constitutional issues. And why is it that Rosenstein is not being held to account? Rosenstein is the official responsible, not Sessions. We may be upset about what Sessions has done in terms of recusal, but Rosenstein is the responsible official. And so this has got to be checked. And again, Judicial Watch is proud to be able to do the work, to provide the oversight that the rest of Washington and the rest of Congress, and Congress isn't doing, and that no one else is doing. Everyone is afraid to take on the Mueller investigation, raise questions about it. Congress is afraid, well, not afraid, they don't want to because they find it convenient. And the Justice Department is in cover-up mode for Mueller. And so hopefully this lawsuit will get this basic information that we we want under law and are entitled to under law. So this is an example of the agencies protecting or engaging in secret behavior in order to harm President Trump, in my view. And this is not targeting Hillary Clinton. This is secrecy that is, if it came out, and I guarantee you if the numbers came out, and when they come out, it's going to be embarrassing to the Justice Department. The numbers are going to be outrageous to taxpayers and to Congress, and that's why they're in cover-up mode. And on top of this, we were just, we had a court victory, and this kind of shows you that there's two sides to this coin. You've got the Justice Department protecting the Get Trump at Any Cost Russia investigation, and also defending Hillary Clinton. And we had a judge just ruled recently against Tillerson's State Department and the Justice Department, run by Jeff Sessions. And the judge overruled their effort to keep certain emails from Mrs. Clinton, at least the content of those emails, private. And what were the emails about? Her decision to use an iPad or BlackBerry, despite warnings from security officials that she would be putting her security or the nation's security at risk. And you can imagine the government didn't want to turn these records over under President Obama, but why were they fighting us under President Trump? Again, did Sessions recuse himself from Clinton matters? Maybe he did. So Rod Rosenstein should be asked about this. I see in the news there's been some debate about whether Rex Tillerson likes Donald Trump or not. Well, you know, it would explain that his behavior in terms of helping Hillary Clinton, if he, quote, he doesn't like him. And I just can't believe that we're in court fighting this administration to get access about documents about whether Hillary Clinton knowingly engaged in unsecure email and personal device practices over the warnings of security. Now, we already knew this in large measure because, for instance, the National Security Agency was telling the State Department, stop asking for permission to use an iPad for the secretary. And the language they used was, go back and shut up and color. You're not fooling us. Stop asking for this ridiculous request that is obviously so dangerous. And Mrs. Clinton herself joked about the security hawks trying to cramp her style on BlackBerries. So this is the sort of thing that Judicial Watch lawyers have to do day in and day out. I just don't come on and talk about stuff. We are in court. My colleagues who are attorneys go to court on behalf of Judicial Watch, on behalf of our clients, to get access to this information. And it's bad enough to have to battle the Obama administration, but we're battling the deep state, or frankly, the appointees of the Trump administration. And along those lines, or not along those lines, but we did get some records recently showing why the Obama administration might want to have all of this material hidden, and the bureaucrats still running the show would want to protect them from accountability. We have uncovered new documents from the Obama-era IRS, HHS, and White House showing that the IRS was arguably being abused in terms of using your confidential taxpayer information to propagandize on behalf of Obamacare. And so this is what happened. So the IRS has information because of the Obamacare penalty. If you don't have insurance, you're supposed to pay some sort of tax penalty. So the IRS is aware of that. And HHS, under the law, they're supposed to basically give people options if they are aware that this penalty has been paid by individuals. So you get the penalty, you're supposed to get a note. So here are your options. Well, that isn't what the Obama administration wanted to do. They wanted to go full throttle into basically brainwashing you into getting Obamacare. And I don't say that with much exaggeration. And I encourage you to go look at the documents I'm talking about. You can look at the court ruling I'm talking about. You can look at those Hillary Clinton emails they don't want you to see, and the ones that we found that you should see. And you can look at these new documents that we have, all available at our website at judicialwatch.org. And so these new documents show that the IRS wanted to send up to half a dozen letters with different language to American taxpayers, working with HHS and the White House on drafting the responses. Why is the White House involved in working with the IRS to target taxpayers with Obamacare propaganda? And it isn't just some little old agency in the White House. It's the Orwellian-named White House Behavioral Sciences team. And this is what the email says. These letters have been drafted with input from the White House Behavioral Sciences team and CMS, which is Centers for Medicaid or Medicare Services at HHS, and have been approved by CMS. And IRS staff provided a lot of assistance. So here you got the IRS and the White House and HHS bureaucrats all working together to try to scare you into buying Obamacare. And like I said, they're only supposed to provide options under the law. But instead, they were warning you about the penalty and what might happen if you don't buy it. All of this really scary language designed to intimidate you into getting Obamacare. And we have the documents that show that they knew they may be running afoul of the law. So they had their lawyers paper the record. And of course, they don't want to give us details about that, and much of that material is blacked out. So we may have to battle for that. But what we've uncovered is scandal enough. And how much money did they spend doing this? $5 million. That's right, $5 million sending these threatening letters or intimidating letters out with the help of the brainwashing team at the White House. Your tax dollars at work. And what I'd like to know, I don't know if anyone asked the administration this, is this still going on? Is HHS still working with the IRS to send these intimidatory letters to the American people who didn't want any part of Obamacare and were willing to, or because they couldn't afford Obamacare, forced to pay the penalty? And were punished for not having health insurance by the federal government? This is what we need to find out, if it's stopping, and we need to find out what else was going on here so there is accountability. No one wants to look at the IRS either. They don't want to look at Mueller. They don't want to look at the IRS. They don't want to look at Obamacare. But Judicial Watch is doing this. And no wonder it took a federal lawsuit and a court order to get these records out. So I encourage you to go to Judicial Watch's website and take a look. And I have another case to talk to you about. And this one's an interesting one too, because it kind of shows you the almost casual lawlessness this city has. in not only its approach to the rule of law, but to the fundamental basis of our nation's government, which is the United States Constitution. And under federal law and under the Constitution, the United States Capitol is essentially run by Congress. Congress has jurisdiction over the Capitol. So you may, and as a district resident, we have what is called home rule, which allows us to have a mayor and a DC council and all these little entities called advisory neighborhood commissions. But all of that is with the permission of Congress. And if Congress wanted to, they could shut it all down and appoint, as it used to be, an administrator to run the District of Columbia. Now, the left is outraged at this. They think that the district needs to be a state and that any constitutional controls on the ability of District of Columbia to run itself is an moral outrage. Now, in order to change the rules, they have to go to the constitutional amendment process. But they don't want to do that. They just want to flout the law and pretend they can get away with it. And in this case, every dollar that is spent by the District of Columbia has to be authorized specifically by Congress and signed into law by the President. So if the District of Columbia passes a budget, that budget needs to be approved by Congress, and that approval needs to be signed into law by the President. Now, as you might imagine, the statehood activists who control the DC government are outraged at that, and they don't want that to happen. So they concocted this scheme by which they said that we're going to pass our own budget and our own tax scheme, and we're just going to do it without, and we don't care if Congress gives permission or not. Well, they were previously advised by their own legal team, and I think the mayor, previous mayor, also agreed with this, that that was not right and that was not legal. And another district court judge, had found, and it's called the Local Budget Act, is a naked and unabashed effort. Oh, this is the House. Actually, the House of Representatives filed an amicus brief in our case supporting this. The Local Budget Act is a naked and unabashed effort to strip Congress of powers vested in it by Article 1 of the Constitution and to circumvent the constitutionally prescribed legislative process that the district and its supporters previously and repeatedly have acknowledged is the one constitutionally appropriate way to proceed. So Judicial Watch is suing the District of Columbia on behalf of a taxpayer who objects to this lawlessness. And we had a court hearing on it earlier this week. I wasn't able to attend, but my attorney colleague, Michael Pikesha, who was representing our client in court that day, he tells me he was up against 5 lawyers on the other side. 5 lawyers, including, I think, a private law firm that was providing pro bono legal services to either the mayor or the DC government. And Michael was the only one, and Judicial Watch was the only one in that courtroom, at least before the judge, standing for the rule of law. You know, Congress has filed its amicus brief, but they haven't done anything substantial to police what the District of Columbia is doing in an abusive way. You know, the president there, I can't imagine the president even knows about this, so who knows what's going on there. And it's up to little old Judicial Watch to come in and defend the Constitution, which is being trampled by the District of Columbia government here with the acquiescence of Congress and the executive branch. And this is what I love about Judicial Watch. We do this tough work where no one else is willing to do it. So I don't know what the court's going to rule there. I'm sure it will be a continued court fight. We've already had one federal court judge in a separate but seemingly related case essentially rule in our favor, at least in terms of the underlying legal issues, saying that this is not legal. So hopefully this lower court will follow the lead of her colleague on the district court here in the District of Columbia. Again, this is the federal court level. But I would posit that there's no one else in Washington doing what we're doing. Who else is suing for Mueller information? Who else is exposing what the Obama, IRS, and HHS is doing in terms of abusing your rights and confidential information? Who else is in court against a powerful local entity like the District of Columbia, the Capitol, to try to protect the constitutional principle? that the District of Columbia, the capital of the United States, is of all the people, not just the corrupt politicians here in the district. There's no one else doing that. And so that's why you should support Judicial Watch. And if you like what you hear here, I want you to also get the word out about our work. Share this video. Share our other weekly update videos. And I just so you know, we are investigating everything. I say that half jokingly, but not really. And we may not sue on everything up front, but we're usually looking in on pretty much any matter of public importance that has a corruption angle that you're concerned about. We were just highlighting the fact this week, for instance, that we're investigating the death of Seth Rich. You may not know who he is, but he was a young staffer with the Democratic National Committee who was murdered last year. Some folks have tied his murder to the DNC email hacks and leaks, and I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that when there are murders that are politically sensitive, and the Seth Rich murder is, something usually goes wrong or something usually goes awry, and that's why we have FOIAs out there, and we've been looking at this issue. We've also been looking at our Ron brothers, which, if you haven't followed that, you should go online and look it up. Luke Rosiak, our own Chris Farrell, interviewed this week. There's a great video interview of him up this week on our website at YouTube and elsewhere. They were a group of Pakistanis who were working on the Hill and who were protected by Democrats despite evidence they were up to no good in committing crimes. And we don't know why they were committing these crimes that include financial fraud and other matters, but you can't trust Congress to get to the bottom of it. The Republicans don't want to do it, and obviously the Democrats, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, has been called up as the lead protector of this criminal racket. So Judicial Watch has been investigating this. Now, we haven't filed any lawsuits yet, but trust me, we're doing the investigations. So there may be other issues out there. You're saying, why isn't Judicial Watch doing this, this, and this? We are usually on top of it all. So just trust me on that. But don't be shy about alerting us to issues that you care about, because sometimes we don't catch it all, especially if there are local or state corruption issues. I rely on you, and we rely on you to be our watchdogs across the nation. And so keep in contact with us. We try to review your comments, but support our work, get others to support our work, but in the least, get others to read the material we get out there so they know also, as fellow citizens, what exactly this government's up to. So thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. I don't know if you all get Mondays off. Many of you probably don't, but try to enjoy the rest of the week, and I'll see you next time.